Many people right now, many analysts are asking, can the United States win a war against Iran? Because that seems to be where things are going. Now, there is the very obviousness that it's a very complicated situation, and it's one that it's not going to be an easy invasion. I mean, look at what happened in Afghanistan. Right? They're there 2 decades and still can't take over the country to the full extent. And we know it would be very bloody and very dangerous to take on someone who is as developed as the Islamic Republic actually is. But here's some information. Now, this information is just a little bit out of date, but it does shed some light. A simulation referred to as the Millennium exercise, a Millennium contest, in 2002 simulated an invasion of the United States into Iran. And let's just say it didn't go very well. Now, this was a major wargame exercise that was carried out by the United States Armed Forces in mid-2002. Now, it ran from July 24 to August 15 and cost upwards of $250 million. That's a hell of a wargame exercise. This is no Hearts of Iron 4 game. So this was a very, very serious war game that was carried out. It was fully programmed with a whole ton of variables and everything. Possibly, I would really like to play it as a game. I mean, I'm sure probably everybody's. Now, it involved both live exercises and computer simulations. The simulation had two sides, red and blue. Red was, in fact, Iran. It was a nondescript Middle Eastern country, but from its position on the map, it's very clear that it was Iran. And blue was the United States. Now, the problem here is that the simulation didn't go as the United States expected. Red received an ultimatum from blue, essentially a surrender document demanding a response within 24 hours. Thus, warned of blue's approach, Red used a fleet of small boats to determine the position of blue's fleet by the second day of the exercise. In a preemptive strike, Red launched a massive salvo of cruise missiles that overwhelmed Blue's electronic sensors and destroyed 16 warships. This included 1 aircraft carrier, 10 cruisers, 5 of 6 amphibious ships. An equivalent success in real conflict would have resulted in the deaths of over 20,000 U.S. service personnel. Soon after the cruise missile offensive, another significant portion of Blue's navy was sunk by an armada of small red boats, which carried out both conventional and suicide attacks that capitalized on Blue's inability to detect them as well as expected. Essentially, what happened was the Iranian Navy destroyed the U.S. Navy in the simulation. Now, you can argue that this was, quite a while ago and that the technology has improved since then. But it has also improved in Iran since then. Their ballistic missile technology is significantly better than it was almost 20 years ago. So this is very telling. Essentially, Iran destroyed the U.S.'s naval fleet. Now, keep this in perspective. When the U.S. lost the Vietnam War, they had lost about 50,000 of their soldiers. That's what it took to essentially admit defeat in the Vietnamese theater. 20,000 could be done in about 2 days. So think about that in terms of combat effectiveness, or, kill-death ratios, etc. Now, here's the thing. The U.S. wasn't particularly happy about having lost the conflict in the simulation, so they decided to do it again. After the wargame was restarted, its participants were forced to follow a script drafted to ensure a blue force victory. Among other rules imposed by the script, the red force was ordered to turn on their anti-aircraft radar in order for them to be destroyed. It was not allowed to shoot down any of the aircraft bringing Blue Force troops ashore. Van Ripper, the guy in charge, also claimed that the exercise officials denied him the opportunity to use his own tactics and ideas against the Blue Force, and they also ordered the Red Force not to use certain weapon systems against Blue Force, even though they ordered the location of the Red Force units to be revealed. In other words, the game had to be horribly rigged in favor of the United States in order for them to win. Essentially, Iran could not use their air force. They could not shoot down incoming planes that were carrying troops. In other words, they were severely, severely handicapped. And this is the only way the U.S. could win. Now, the people who ran the simulation, at least some of them were really angry about this. It's $250 million down the drain in order to learn that they couldn't win a war. And that, well, essentially, they had to rig it in order for them to be able to win. Well, you see, when you do that, you don't really learn anything. There's nothing positive that comes out of this. You're supposed to learn the lesson that your tactics don't work. So when they found that out, they rigged them so that they would. Now, Van Ripper said that the Vice Admiral Marty Mayer altered the exercise's purpose to reinforce the existing military doctrine with notions of infallibility within the U.S. rather than serving as a learning experience, which means they realized they couldn't win. So rather than changing their tactics or reorienting their military doctrine, they just deliberately blinded themselves. They deliberately looked the other way and continued to do something that they have now revealed does not work. Van Ripper also stated that the war game was rigged so that it appeared to validate the modern joint service warfighting concepts as it was supposed to be testing. He quoted in the ZDF New York Times documentary The Perfect War as saying that what he saw in the Millennium simulation echoed the same view promoted by the Defense Department under Robert McNamara before and during the Vietnam War, namely that the United States military could not and would not be defeated, essentially reaffirming American exceptionalism, the belief that they cannot lose, that they cannot fail, and that they cannot be wrong. Isn't this the definition of ignorance? That even when you're shown to be wrong, you continue to do the wrong thing anyway. Now think about this. This is what led to the disastrous defeat in Vietnam. They could not win. And not only could they not win, they deliberately went with a plan that they knew didn't work. They perceive themselves to be invincible and thus cannot lose. Now the question is, why would you do that? If you spent your whole life in the military, especially something as high-ranking as these officials, why would you deliberately strangle yourself like this? Well, the reason is that the particular military doctrine used by the United States is contingent upon certain moneyed interests. In other words, there are people with enough influence in Washington who make a lot of money out of the way the U.S. military fights. And as a result, they're resistant to any change because then they wouldn't make so much money anymore. So understand this. The free market, capitalism, is literally strangling the U.S. military on its combat doctrine in order to make a profit. Now, I, for one, actually didn't see that coming, because I would have thought that at least the military men would step in and say, this doesn't work, don't do it, we don't care about your profits, we care about military victory, because that's their whole purpose for being. But apparently, that's not the case. The U.S. deliberately goes with tactics they know don't work, simply because they know it'll make a profit. Would this be equally applicable to a situation between Iran and the United States today? Well, that's another question entirely. Both sides have significantly improved their military technology. But the U.S. is still using the same doctrine today as they were back then. It appears that they've learned nothing and would quite possibly fall into that exact same trap. And I get the definite feeling that the leadership of Donald Trump wouldn't exactly be any kind of counter to bad ideas coming out of the US government. Thank you for watching. If you like this program, then please head over to my Patreon page and set up a monthly donation. It's your donations that keep this program running. Also, if you would like, please rate, comment, subscribe, and share in various social media.